I woke up and didn't recognize my surroundings. I was on a street, and passerby were staring at me, surprised. The next second, I realized I was lying on a bed that some people I didn't know were carrying somewhere. Just like in that one meme. I was probably stuck in a nightmare. All of a sudden, I heard my parents shout behind us. I turned around and saw them being kicked out of our house. What was going on? I got really scared. I panicked and fainted. Hi, my name's Chloe, and I come from a very wealthy family. Dad was head of a large company. One day, I was sitting in a college cafe with my friends. We were choosing food when Claire suddenly walked by us. Everyone made fun of her because she worked part-time as a waitress in a cheap little diner. Hey, Claire, take our order. I'll give you a nice tip. Anyone else in her place probably would have refused, but Claire needed the money. She came over, listened to everything we wanted, and came back with a tray of food. Here, you've earned it. Everyone laughed and praised my wit. Claire turned around and ran off somewhere. In the evening, my parents and I went to a gala dinner. It was thrown in honor of the birthday of Dad's company. At the entrance of the restaurant, I saw a homeless man. He had a huge beard and was wearing rags. He smelled awful. I had to cover my nose with one hand.
Could you give me some money? Just enough to buy some bread.
My parents grimaced.
You should find a job and stop asking hard-working people for money.
If you ever come up to us again, we'll call the police. When the homeless man got out of our way, we walked into the restaurant. Soon, everyone was there, and my grandpa, Mr. Ranger, took the floor. He had founded the company and then handed it over to my dad. To be honest, he hadn't been all there for a long time. We only put up with him because he gave us money so often. The official part was, as always, boring. Having nothing better to do, I wandered among the guests. Then, a conversation caught my attention. The company's employees were discussing my dad.
He's a terrible boss and a real tyrant. If it weren't for Mr. Ranger, I wouldn't be able to manage things at all. And his wife and daughter, arrogant, spoiled. They've never achieved a thing in their lives.
Ugh, how dare they say that about my family? I came closer, and they got scared. Didn't expect me to hear you talking, did you? How dare you say that about my family? Dad, did you hear that? Dad was furious and fired both of them, and it served them right. The morning after the event began with bad news. When I came down to breakfast, my parents were arguing about something. They looked upset and maybe even scared. What's wrong?
Just some problems at our company.
I looked at him incredulously. He really wouldn't seem so nervous if it wasn't something serious. My parents' behavior made me nervous, but I calmed down soon enough. That day, I decided I would skip college. I never bothered studying hard. Why do it? I already had everything. Instead of listening to boring lectures, I went shopping. I chose a bunch of clothes and was about to pay for them when I found out that all my cards were blocked. What the hell? I called my dad right away.
The problems in the company are more serious than we thought. All of our accounts are frozen.
My parents and I went to see my grandfather. He lived in a modest house, even though he was a very rich man. Dad asked him for advice. Gramps just smiled absent-mindedly.
There's nothing that can be done.
Mom lost her temper.
You crazy old man! We're about to lose our entire fortune, and you don't even care!
And yeah, he really did look like he didn't care. He continued to smile and didn't even seem offended when my mom insulted him. The atmosphere at home was tense all evening. We didn't even have dinner and went to our rooms early. I spent half my night on social media trying to get my mind off things. So I didn't sleep very well because of that. In the morning, I woke up and didn't recognize my surroundings. I was outside and passerby were staring at me, surprised. The next second, I realized I was lying on a bed that some people that I didn't know were carrying somewhere. Just like in that one meme. I was probably stuck in a nightmare. And all of a sudden, I heard my parents shout behind us. I turned around and saw that they were being kicked out of our house. What was going on? I got really scared, panicked, and fainted. I came to in a shabby little room. There was only an iron bed and a sagging wardrobe in it. Water dripped from the ceiling. What was the meaning of this? I ran out into a narrow corridor. My parents were sitting in the next room. What happened? Why are we here?
We're broke. I made a big deal that fell through. We don't even have a house left. The bailiffs came and took it. We resisted, but they just threw us out. And you were carried out on the bed. Scoundrels.
I had no words. All we had left was the shack where Mom and her parents had once lived. We were dirt poor. The three of us went to my grandpa's house again, but this time no one opened the door. All of a sudden, a bald man with a bushy mustache came out of the next house.
Mr. Ranger's left. He knew you'd come, and he asked me to give you this letter.
When we read it, we were stunned. The old man said that the company had gone bankrupt and his accounts had also been frozen. He decided he would use the last of his money to move to a house by the ocean and relax. My parents were furious.
He's gone mad in his old age. He should have given us the money. We don't have any.
We tried to think of ways where we could at least get food. I suddenly got an idea. I had a lot of friends. They could lend me a little bit. I called Mickey, but as soon as I mentioned money, my friend interrupted me.
Yeah, I know your family has financial issues, but I'm not gonna lend you any. Sorry.
And then she hung up. I didn't understand what had come over her. None of my other friends even bothered to answer their phones. It was really weird. By evening, the hunger was unbearable. Dad made Mom and I sell our jewelry. It was all so expensive, but we barely got anything for it. I cried all night, and in the morning, I looked terrible. I wanted to skip college again, but then we got a call from the dean's office. They warned me that I had fallen behind and I'd soon be expelled if I kept missing classes. When my parents had been doing well, allowances had been made for me. But now, everything had changed. I had to pull myself together and drag myself to college. I thought that the worst had already happened, but that was honestly just the beginning. It turned out that someone from my college had filmed me being carried down the street on a bed, and he'd put it to music from that same meme and posted it online. The whole college had already seen it. Everyone laughed at me, but what I definitely wasn't expecting was for my friends to turn their backs on me. Even Mickey pretended like we didn't know each other. This day couldn't get any worse, or so it seemed. I came back home in a terrible mood, and then my parents ruined it even more. They had decided to sell off my iPhone and my clothes. Instead of the cool things I once had, they gave me second-hand clothes and an ancient phone. It was so humiliating. We tried to save money, but we failed terribly. We ordered food from restaurants several times a day, and my mother went to a beauty salon for her procedures.
Well, what do you expect me to do?
Eat fast food?
And stop taking care of my looks?
Honestly, no wonder we'd run out of money so quickly. And we were left with nothing again. It became seriously obvious that we had to look for jobs. Dad's pride wouldn't allow him to work for his past employees. Mom had zero skills, so they started pressuring me.
We've supported you for years. Now it's your turn. Find a part-time job.
I was stunned. They wanted me to work? No way. Moreover, it wasn't like I had skills either. We had a fight, but in the end, I decided that my parents were right about one thing. I had to at least try. I responded to many ads, but no one would hire me. I couldn't even find employment in my major because I wasn't a good student. And speaking of major, things got worse in college. I had hurt a lot of people, and now everyone was taking it out on me. One day, I came to the cafeteria and wanted to get food when Mickey suddenly called my name.
Hey, Chloe, bring us some of that food and you'll get a good tip.
The situation with Claire immediately came to mind, and everyone laughed at me. I couldn't stand it. I burst into tears and ran away. I was standing in the hallway, wiping my face, when a hand suddenly fell on my shoulder. I turned around and saw Claire, and it might be hard to believe, but she comforted me.
Hey, don't worry. Soon they'll move on to bully someone else and they'll completely forget about you. It's always like that.
I felt ashamed of myself. I had treated her so horribly. Claire, I'm sorry for what I did to you.
I forgave you a long time ago. Oh, by the way, we need another waitress at the diner. I could put in a word for you.
Of course, I didn't want to get a job at a diner, but I had no other choice. I knew working would suck, but I didn't realize how much. Problems arose on the first day. I couldn't get anything right and customers were so infuriating. I wasn't used to serving and I kept getting angry with them. It took me a whole week to swallow my pride, and I couldn't have done it without Claire. She explained everything to me several times and helped out a lot. One day, a guy walked into the diner. For some reason, his face looked familiar. Where had I seen him before? I had to take his order and I immediately wanted to punch him.
Bring me some orange juice. No, I've actually changed my mind. I want apple juice.
Here's your apple juice.
Girl, are you kidding me? I asked for carrot juice.
I was ready to murder him. That jerk spent several hours in the diner harassing me. Eventually, I couldn't bear it any longer, and I almost started crying. But I pulled myself together, and I continued to work. After my shift, Claire came up to me.
Wow, he's so handsome, but so stupid.
Yeah, that's for sure. And the nightmare didn't end there. He started coming to the cafe every day.
I want to be served by that girl over there.
I was so sick of him! In the end, I couldn't stand it any longer. What do you want from me? He surprised me by smiling.
Maybe I like you. By the way, my name's Chris. You wanna go for a walk with me?
You know, you chose a very strange way to hit on me. Walk by yourself. That jerk ruined my mood for the rest of the day. But something nice happened in the evening. I got my first salary. I shared it with my parents. I was looking forward to the praise. They took almost all the money, and then Dad pursed his lips.
Well, this isn't very much.
Seriously? There was no limit to how disrespected I could be in a day. Well, maybe you could find a job instead of blaming everything on me. After a couple days, Dad finally found a job as a manager at a small company. Mom stayed home and only sometimes went to salons. And she paid for her procedures with the money that I earned, by the way. Meanwhile, Chris kept coming to the diner. Strangely enough, he stopped being all that unbearable. He would just sit at a table and watch me work. Then he started bringing me small gifts and asking me out. Eventually, I agreed. I really wanted to get my mind off of things and feel like a beautiful girl again. Chris actually turned out to be a pretty interesting guy. He studied at a drama college and dreamed of being a famous actor.
What are you dreaming about?
His question stumped me. I suddenly realized that I had been living with no goals. I thought for a long time, and I decided I wanted to own a business. That goal inspired me, so I took up my studies in earnest. I started ignoring the other students' taunts, and I finally began to make progress. Even the teachers noticed it and praised me. Something had finally gone right for me. Things were looking up. However, my parents were still angry and dissatisfied. But one day, I ran out of my luck. Again, the head of the diner unexpectedly called me into his office.
A month's earnings have disappeared from the safe. Did you take it?
What was he talking about? I hadn't taken anything, so I denied it. But then he presented me with his evidence. The camera footage showed me approaching the safe, and immediately after that, the money was gone. But I was just wiping a table there.
If you don't bring back that money tomorrow, I'm calling the police.
Damn it, I didn't have any rich friends anymore. And Claire was also barely making ends meet. And she was also the only one who believed me and supported me. Well, Chris believed me too.
I'll figure something out.
It's not like I have high hopes. When I told my parents about everything, they got angry.
How could you get in a situation like this? We're already pinching pennies. It would have been better if you actually had stolen the money.
What? How could you say something like that? That was when I realized my parents didn't love me. They were just as selfish as I used to be. And that's when I remembered my grandfather. He had always been interested in my life, invited me over, and took care of me. I had taken it for granted. Like my parents, I had just written him off as my crazy old gramps. I felt so ashamed of myself. I decided I would go back to his house again. Maybe he would be back home and he could help. On the way there, I called Chris and I told him about everything. It was kind of amazing how close we'd grown in such a short time. But no one opened the door. The next moment, my grandpa's neighbor came outside.
Mr. Ranger isn't back yet.
I was about to answer when I suddenly noticed something weird. The skin on his bald head was peeling off on one side. The neighbor had noticed it too and tried to push it back on, but I tore it off in one sharp movement. Then I grabbed his mustache and pulled it off. The person under all the props turned out to be Chris. Of course! That was why he had seemed so familiar. But what in the world was going on? I still hadn't processed everything yet when my grandfather came out from behind the house. Was he kidding me?
Call your parents. They should be here too.
When my parents arrived, they threw a huge fit. A group of organizers had suddenly appeared as well, and that's when we found out the truth. It turned out that Dad's company was doing just fine.
I'm not as crazy as you think. I knew perfectly well how spoiled my son, daughter-in-law, and granddaughter had become. I wanted to teach you a lesson and arranged this little prank. My neighbor, Chris, gave me the idea. He often transforms and conducts social experiments. At first, he pretended to be a homeless guy by the restaurant. When I saw how you treated him, I realized it was time to act.
It turned out that Chris had only come to the cafe to provoke me, and the money from the cash register wasn't actually missing. That was all just part of the show. My parents and I couldn't believe it. Of course, I was angry at first, but I still thanked my grandfather. This whole experience had helped me to change. The only one I was really angry at was Chris. I almost fell in love with you, but you...
I fell in love with you too! Chloe, I'm sorry. At first, I was acting according to the plan, but then I really grew to like you.
My parents never forgave my grandfather. They didn't at all understand why he had done it in the first place. For me, things eventually went back to normal. Well, almost. My former friends tried to get close with me again, but I ignored them. Claire was my real friend. My relationship with Chris was doing great too. I stayed mad at him for a bit, but I eventually forgave him. We started dating. I also spent a lot of time with my grandfather. One day, I came home and heard my parents talking. They were discussing some problems in the company. I had a sense of déjà vu.
We're on the verge of bankruptcy again.
Right. Again.
This must be just your old man again. He wants to ruin our lives.
I didn't think that my grandpa would have repeated his prank. So the next day I went to see him and get to the bottom of things.
Chloe, I had nothing to do with it.
Together, we rushed to the company's head office. He personally checked every document and then shook his head.
Your dad really made a bad deal.
The company stayed afloat for a while, but then it failed. It took a while for my parents to believe that this was actually happening. And as a result, we lost everything. Again. Even our personal belongings and the house. Except now, for real. Dad had to go back to being a manager. Mom was constantly throwing fits. And soon, I moved out. My grandpa had some savings left. He taught me everything he knew.
Failures are a part of life. They're always followed by successes.
I tried to study hard, and after a while, I became the best student in our college. My grandfather and I opened a small company, and now I'm trying to develop it. I want to have my own business and then surpass my teacher.
My name's Kyle, and I grew up in an orphanage. But I consider myself very lucky. The orphanage was like a big, happy family. I had a lot of friends, and the people who worked there took care of us like we were all their own children. They worked very hard to place us with great families, and many of us actually got out of there and continued to live amazing lives. I got adopted when I was 6. At first, I didn't even want to go. I just knew I'd miss all my friends. I cried as my new parents wrestled me out of there. I grabbed one of the pillars outside of the orphanage and didn't let go until the administrator asked me to go with my new family. My friends all cried too. They told me not to forget about them and to write all the time. I did. We all kept in touch throughout our lives. My family wasn't so bad at all. My adoptive mom's name was Sophia, and my dad's name was Peter. For 3 whole days, I didn't talk to them. I just stayed in my room and refused to touch my food. But eventually, I realized how lucky I was. They were patient and kind and generous. The room they gave me was huge. There was even a game room and a movie room that they set up just for me. As soon as I got there, they took me shopping and bought me so many clothes and toys. When I got sick, they took care of me. Mom and Dad sent me to the most expensive school in the country, And it was there that I found out that not everyone was nice like my parents or the other kids from the orphanage. I was proud of being adopted, but my classmates made fun of me for it. They called me names. They told me that I was left by my parents because I was ugly, and because they didn't love me. I acted out because of that. I started talking back to Mom and Dad. I started blaming them for all the torment I was going through at school. Kyle, we didn't raise you to become like this. You can't talk to your mom like that. My mom? She's not even my real mother. And you're not my real dad, so you can't tell me what to do. Mom sobbed in the corner. She was hurt by my words. And I admit, I felt guilty. But I was so mad that I didn't want to budge. You live under my roof and eat off of my table, so I will tell you what to do. Dad grounded me for a month, and he took away my PlayStation. I was furious at him for that. But when I went back to school, suddenly my tormentors were gone, and my classmates were all nice to me. I still don't know exactly what happened, but I overheard one of the teachers talk about it. They said my dad stormed through the school and demanded to know exactly who was teasing me. Mom and Dad found out that my tormentors' parents worked for them. They immediately fired them from their jobs and told them that if their sons ever came near me again, they would sue them. I had never seen my mom and dad angry for real, and it wasn't hard for me to imagine them doing that. But when I found out the lengths they would go to just protect me, I apologized to them and promised that I would be a better son. I finished high school and went on to a business school. Dad wanted me to work for him and one day take over the family business. I graduated with flying colors, and to celebrate my achievement, Mom and Dad bought me my own house and a car. It wasn't anything fancy. Mom and Dad had lots of money, but they kept our lives simple and humble. They taught me how to save money and how to live without excessive luxuries. I started working for Dad's company, and unfortunately, my coworkers didn't like me. They talked behind my back and pretended I was their friend, when the truth was, they all wanted me gone. I wish he'd just make a huge mistake, so the boss won't have a choice but to fire him. Yeah, pretty sure he only got the job because he's the boss's son. We should make sure he fails. At the very end of my first week there, my coworkers dumped all of their work on me. They all just left everything. And the stuff they left me was for a very important merger that was coming up. I stayed up for 3 whole days just to finish everything. But just as I was about to finish it all, I fell asleep. And when I woke up, it was 10:30. I was 2 hours late. I panicked so much, I didn't even have time to grab a bite or change clothes. I just ran to my car and drove like I was flying to the office. And when I finally burst into the conference room, everyone was already on their way out. My dad looked very disappointed in me. Dad! Dad, it wasn't my fault. Those guys... They made me do all their work! But Dad didn't want to listen. I knew I had to make it right somehow, so I asked for help from everyone I knew from business school. I called them up and asked them if they knew anyone who worked at the other company we were doing the merger with. And luckily enough, there was one. Her name was Stacy, and she and I never really talked much back in university. But now, she was going to help me. With her help, I found out where the CEO of that company was going to be that evening. So before he got there, I made a reservation for the most expensive table there. I met Mr. Gershwin outside the restaurant, and it was such a surprise when I saw that Stacy was with him. It turned out she was his secretary. I treated the CEO to a luxurious dinner as my apology for the merger meeting not having gone to plan. I convinced him to take a look at the materials I had been working on. And by the end of the dinner, Mr. Gershwin was so impressed that he promised me he'd sign the merger documents first thing in the morning. The guys tried to take credit for my work, But Mr. Gershwin told Dad it was my work that impressed him. And so, I got promoted and became an executive. Nobody questioned me being in the company after that. To thank Stacy, I took her out to dinner, and we kinda started dating after that. She was my first girlfriend, so I didn't know what to expect. It was then that I realized maybe Stacy wasn't the kind of girl I should have dated. She was demanding, and she liked spending too much. I found out that she would always use half her salary just for shopping. It was no wonder she had a lot of debt. And she was always running out of money. She moved into my place, and I would drive her to work. I thought if I helped her save on bills, she'd finally be able to pay off her stuff. But no, Stacy only used her extra money for more shopping. When I introduced her to my parents, she behaved horribly. She complained the whole night, making Mom and Dad feel bad because they didn't take us to a more expensive restaurant. She even had the gall to tell them that she was expecting a gift from them. Wow, you guys are millionaires, but why are you so cheap? Stacy, stop it! Oh, please. You have all this money and you're not using it. Why don't you pay for my credit card? I'll consider it a gift to welcome me into the family. After all, maybe one day I'll say yes to your son if he proposes. And I'll be your daughter-in-law. Stacy, you're embarrassing yourself. Shut up. You're shutting me up? You're just like your parents. You're so stingy and cheap. I can't even convince you to buy me a lousy pair of shoes. Everyone in the restaurant started watching us. Even my parents were starting to get embarrassed by the scene. If you want shoes, Stacy, buy them with your own money. I'm not your sugar daddy. What is the point of having a rich boyfriend if you won't spoil me? You know what? You're right. I'll buy it with my own money. I bet you I'll have a proper sugar daddy in a day. You'll regret saying no to me. You and your cheap family can choke on your cheap salads. She stormed out of there and I never saw her again. Until a few years later. Stacy stared into the window at the fashion on display of a designer brand store. When she saw the expensive price tag, she frowned. Disappointed, she began to walk away. I was wearing tattered clothes and looking at some jackets when we bumped into each other. She didn't recognize me at first, but then she looked me up and down and laughed. Well, look at you. How the mighty have fallen. I guess you got your karma. I bet your company folded and now you're poor. I don't think this store is in your price range, so you better look elsewhere. Just as she finished mocking me, 4 store clerks came out carrying leather trunks in each hand. Where would you like them delivered, sir? The orphanage on 9 Main Street. Thanks, boys. Here's something for your troubles. I handed the guys $1,000 each, and I saw Stacy's eyes widen in shock. Since we last saw each other, I had worked my way up the company and became the CEO after Dad retired. I lived a simple life, so I wore old clothes. On that day, I was on one of my weekly donation drives for the orphanage I grew up in. I didn't know you were still rich. Can I ask you a favor? Can you lend me 50 grand? I have so much debt. When we broke up, I bought those designer shoes. That was when things spiraled out of control. I lost my job, and I had no way to pay my bills. I had to borrow to pay my debt, and now I've been struggling to survive. I just laughed and walked back into my waiting car. You always were irresponsible with money. I'm not going to help you, Stacy. It's time you learned your lesson. I stopped and turned around to smile at her. I think you care too much about price ranges, Stacy. You know, if you have to look at the tag...